in all directions, okay? But it doesn't concentrate it onto something else separate to it. It will concentrate the light onto a solar cell which is placed on the edge here. Okay? So it's a very interesting technology. And it has some very niche, somewhat niche applications, but it's kind of cutting edge today. So something to think about. And I need, as part of this class, this is an important topic that you should be aware of. Okay, so they're called luminescent concentrators. So what are these? They look like this. Usually they are essentially pieces of glass or plastic. Plastic is a lot cheaper. And you can see they're different colors. So what's happening is that light's coming in. There are molecules in here which absorb the sunlight and re-emits it, like fluorescent molecules. And the re-emission is essentially passed down to the edge by total internal reflection and reaches the edge. So when you see this edge being red, because the molecules inside this piece of glass absorb the white light, emitted red light, and it has come to the edge here, concentrated to the edge. That looks bright. Of course, you can change the color by changing the type of molecule, red, green, red. So that already gives us an idea that we can do spectral splitting, which is similar to what we saw in one of the previous lectures. But, so the reason this is interesting is because they can be quite cheap, okay, reduce costs. They can potentially increase efficiency because you can combine different colors to collect different parts of the solar spectrum, much like a spectral splitting. Although that's a big challenge still. You can do building integration, so you can actually think about integrating it as part of the windows in a building and so on. And it's a non-tracking concentrator. So far we've only talked about concentrators where you have to track. Right? The CPC has a very specific acceptance angle. Here, there is no, we can accept all angles because it's based on a very different physical principle. Okay? However, as we will see later on, we still cannot overcome the second law of thermodynamics. Okay? So there's still some limitations involved. So the concentration is achieved by collecting the sunlight over a large area, which is this entire surface on the top, and redirecting the light to a smaller area, which is the edge here, where you place the solar cell for absorption. Okay? That's where the concentration comes from.
Does that only work for discrete frequencies, or can you cover a pretty wide range?
So we'll talk about it, but generally speaking, to cover, so when you say cover wide range, you mean the emission or the absorption?
The absorption
so
and the re-emission.
Yes, so they're related. So generally speaking, it's very hard to make it very broad. We'll talk briefly about it. But that's a whole design of, it's a quantum chemistry problem, where people try to design coupled resonances so you can absorb one, then X, and so on. But generally speaking, a simple way to address it is kind of what's shown here. So this red means that it's absorbing the redder portion, not really red, but redder portions of the sunlight. Whereas this yellow means it's a little bit more energy. So you're taking different chunks of it. So you can imagine just stacking them on top of each other, just like you would do a multi-junction cell. So you can do that. But it's pretty challenging. There's been some work on it, but the efficiency is generally pretty low, as we'll see. So how does it work? It's a transparent material, as shown here. Okay. So it's a piece of plastic, piece of glass. It's doped with molecules which are fluorescent, so they absorb white light, generally speaking. So these molecules will absorb the sunlight, all these colors. Okay, so the light comes in, just like that piece of plexiglass we talked about in the light trapping lecture. Just think about it, just like in one of these windows. Every glass of plexiglass. The fluorophore will absorb the white light, and it will re-emit, just like any fluorescent material. So, it's, for those of you who may not be familiar with fluorescence, you might have seen decorations that glow under UV light, right? Toys or stickers that glow under UV light. So that's exactly the same phenomenon. In that case, the UV is being absorbed, and it's the material is re-emitting the light as visible light, so we can see it. And usually it's black light, we call it black light. It's the exact same situation as here. Now, of course, the light that's re-emitted by these molecules then has to be trapped within this material by total internal reflection. That's what's shown here. We've seen this before. So the incident light comes in, refracts in, this molecule will absorb it, will re-emit in all directions, right? It's a molecule, so it's randomly emitting. But what's trapped has to be within this cone. This angle has to be larger than the critical angle, then it will be trapped. If it's less than the critical angle, it will escape. So that already gives us the answer to this question. Under ideal conditions, what percentage of the enriched photons are trapped light will into reflection? We've done this before. It's basically defined by the solid angle formed by theta c, right? So theta c being sine inverse of 1 over n, and being the refractive index of the material. So this will give us a solid angle, and then from that solid angle, divided by the total solid angle, will give us a probability. We did this in one of the examples. Okay. So that already tells us one of the loss mechanisms, right? You can see only some fraction of the light is actually collected within the slab. So what are the big challenges here? The first challenge is, generally speaking, low efficiency, because as you saw, we alluded to briefly, only a portion of the sunlight is absorbed by each of these molecules. Okay? So you can use multiple molecules, that's one. But that generally, fluorescence is not a very efficient process. In other words, you might end up sending in 1 million photons of sunlight, but you might only get out maybe 10 fluorescent photons. This is referred to as quantum efficiencies. It may not be very, very high. External quantum efficiency. We'll talk more about it shortly. Another important challenge for an actual practical application is the photostability. So the materials that those molecules that are doped generally tend to yellow over time with the UV exposure of the sun. So for instance, some of you might be familiar with polymers that yellow. So my glasses are a good example. So these glasses have what's called a photochromic polymer inside the polycarbonate, which turns dark when I walk out in the sunlight. Right? These you're familiar with the transitions glasses. My glasses are maybe about 7, 8 years old. So you can see they're starting to become more yellow. They're not white anymore. You put it against the white. And that's exactly because over 7, 8 years of UV exposure to sunlight, these molecules are degrading, the photostability. And that's a big problem with these kinds of materials. So if you want a window, of course, after 7 years, you don't want it to yellow in your house. That's a fairly big fundamental problem. Also, heat is an issue as well. So this is just to show what happens to the short circuit current also as a function. So this is for a, excuse me, just to show an example of an organic photovoltaic device. So this is not the fluorescent molecule, but those fluorescent molecules can also be used as a photovoltaic device. A little bit off topic, but all it's showing is that if you look at the short circuit current density of that particular solar cell made from organic materials, as a function of, this is a function of time, as you heat up the material, at at higher temperatures, the short circuit current density decreases, which is basically saying that higher temperatures, these materials don't perform as good. Which is similar to silicon, but opposite to gallium arsenide. So I don't know if you recall, but in the concentrated PV lecture, we talked about the difference between silicon and gallium arsenide as well. Silicon performs worse at high temperatures. Gallium arsenide actually performs better at high temperatures. Really depends on the material structure. Most organics perform worse because of degradation. So we cannot do a lot of concentration onto the organic dye. So in other words, we cannot put a concentrator on top of this to collect even more light. That's very problematic. But lots of people are investigating new materials like quantum dots. Lots of people in the Department of Chemistry here doing quantum dots. In fact, there's a company out of the material science department here. Someone from material science? Do you know this company? They're making quantum dots for, I believe, for displays and something. I don't remember the name. So it's using the same principle. So for displays, you need red, green, and blue. Here, by sending in white light, you can get different colors and you can get different color gamuts and things like that. So very interesting technology. People are also looking at rare earth materials and semiconductor polymers. Now, rare earth materials are interesting because they're inorganic and they're very, very stable. They're used for lasers and things like that. So I want to take a few minutes, maybe a minute or so, I want you to brainstorm and see if you can solve this problem with an optical solution. So let me formulate the problem properly first. The problem I want you to think about is we have a piece of glass with material inside it, which, when illuminated by sunlight over long periods of time, will degrade. Okay? Is there an optical solution that you can come up with that you can mitigate that degradation? So why don't you think? You guys can discuss.
Did you say the degradation is primarily due to UV?
Potentially, and heat. Yeah. But it depends, but primarily, yeah. So that's a good hint. So you're on the right track. But why don't you discuss, maybe you can discuss it then. Talk briefly. Well, any ideas? I'll ask you since you're a professor. Yeah?
Are they reacting from UV light?
Primarily degrades from UV. So.
No, I mean, the whole principle behind it is they're emitting from UV light, or?
That's a good question. I was unclear on that. No, it doesn't have to. So
they're going to absorb and transmit around the same frequency, right?
that's correct. Yes. So we didn't cover that. We're going to look at that in the next slide. But I should clarify that usually these materials will absorb very close to what color they emit. So when I said in one of the previous slides, you had the red color. That means those materials are absorbing close to the red. So the UV is really not doing anything other than damaging it. So that obviously gives you a hint on how to solve it. Which would be what? Yes? Putting sunscreen is an obvious answer. That's very good. Certain types, I suppose. And can be cheap. Well, not necessarily sunscreen, but some formulation like titanium dioxide. So the other option is you can think about designing an optical element on top which simply either absorbs the UV, right? You can put a cover on top which takes care of all the UV, or somehow reflects the UV or put something up here that redirects the UV away from this stuff. Right? There are lots of ways you can think about an optical solution. But yeah, that's what I wanted you to think about. Anyway, some of you were on the right track. So moving on, let's look at what is the primary limitation of this technology. And that's the last topic I want to talk about. So this will be a very short lecture, but we need to talk about other things as well. So the last concept I want you to take away from this is what's called what limits efficiency in this technology. It's defined by what's called the Gutzberger efficiency equation, which is shown on the top there. So what is efficiency? Efficiency is basically the fraction of the incident power that reaches, in this particular definition, reaches the solar cell divided by, ratio of the power that reaches the solar cell divided by what's coming in to the glass. Right? So in other words, if I look at this, I have to look at how much power is going into the system, power in, to power out, which is what is reaching the solar cell. Okay, so lots of things that can happen along the way, and that's what's listed there. Most of them are pretty straightforward to understand, so let's go through it quickly. So it's essentially a product of the efficiency of all the different loss mechanisms. So the first term, 1 minus R, is simple. It's whatever is lost by reflection. So the top surface, I'm going to erase that. This is the top surface, has a refractive index n. This is air, refractive index 1. So obviously there's some Fresnel reflections off the top. Okay, so that's 1 minus R. It tells me how much transmits in. R is reflected. We know this. And you can calculate this easily, minus 1 by n plus 1 squared. It's about 4% for most, n equals Then the second term is the probability of total internal reflection, which we talked about before. The re-emitted light needs to be within the cone angle or outside the cone angle of the escape cone of the critical angle, right? So that's defined by this. Let us see, it's inverse 1 over n, shown there. And the probability of being trapped can be approximately calculated as square root n squared minus 1 by n. We didn't derive this, but this basically comes from computing the solid angle divided by the 4 pi. I won't go into the details. Not important for us. But that number comes out to be about 75%. Okay, then we have the third term, area absorption is the absorption efficiency, which is how much of the incident light is actually absorbed by the molecule. Right? Not 100%, it's whatever it can absorb. So that is usually quite small. So it depends on the molecule. Now, we should also be aware of one very important thing that happens here. So, come back to this picture. If you look at, let's say, this, let's follow this dashed line here. Okay? This molecule has absorbed some light and it's re-emitting. But this dashed line is a photon, which is supposed to end up at the edge here. But it will instead end up at the other molecule. Right? You can see another molecule. And that other molecule, there's a probability that it can reabsorb that photon. And if it reabsorbs it, it might do nothing. It might not emit another photon. In other words, this photon might disappear, basically. That's an important loss mechanism, which tells me I cannot make this arbitrarily big. Now, none of you pointed out an important fallacy in what I said, which is, actually before we go on, we need to clarify this. What is the concentration factor in a luminescent concentrator? Can someone tell me? That's my, actually don't shout, but it's a, maybe discuss it here. It's an important concept. Let's say the area is this to say, and say the area of the solar cell is little a. What's the concentration factor?
Big A divided by little a?
Yeah, so it's obvious, right? Okay, just like remember for comparison, we have our CPC. We have that. Right? Same thing. Now, do you see a problem with this? Because I can make this infinitely big, right? Just make this as big as I want. I can make it a kilometer where this concentration will become insane. Right? Now, what is the fallacy here?
There needs to be a compensation factor on the big A to account for the absorption of the light
Exactly.
moving horizontal.
So if I make this huge, the photon that's emitted from meters away will encounter many more molecules before it reaches it. Same as the solar cell is here, the molecule is the other end. It emits. It's so far away that there's a much higher probability that that photon will never end up reaching here. Right? And if you actually work out the math, the second law of thermodynamics still works. You cannot get arbitrary concentration. Okay? That raises an important question from the second law perspective. Anyway, although it's a more complicated than what I'm saying, so but if anyone's interested, I can point you to some interesting papers. So that's this idea of the reabsorption. So in other words, the molecule might absorb that photon again, and it might get out of the system. So that's an important loss mechanism. The next term is, so I should say something about the absorption efficiency. So we're still here. This term. The LSC, which is the luminescent solar concentrator, must absorb the greatest possible range of wavelengths, as we talked about before, right? All the sunlight. But of course, and it should emit all photon energies that are larger than the band gap of the solar cell that we're using, just like any other solar cell. Right? So that's what that's saying. So if you use a silicon cell, for instance, in other words, if you use a silicon cell at this corner here, at that edge there. It must absorb all the wavelengths with the energy higher than the band gap of silicon. If the energy is less than the band gap of silicon, there's no point of that molecule absorbing it. Exactly what happens. So about 950 nanometers. And you need to emit within this narrow range, or ideally in this narrow range where silicon has the highest spectral absorption. It's trying to be that, close to the band gap. So we can calculate this, turns out to be about 70% or so. The next term here, and we'll see this more carefully when we look at the spectrum. I'll point out what I mean by that. So the next efficiency term is what's called the photoluminescence photometer, which is basically the probability that an excited molecule, or a fluorophore, will emit a photon. So what I mean by that is that from some basic understanding of quantum mechanics, these molecules essentially behave as, you can think about this as a excited state and a ground state. So the molecule generally sits in this ground state. When it absorbs a photon, it goes up to the excited state and it has energy. What we want to happen is have that relax down and emit another photon. Okay? This is fluorescence, generally speaking. But other things can also happen because there are defect states and so on. So other things like that can happen, without emitting any photons. This can happen by losing energy as heat. Those as vibrations in the polymer structure. Okay. And that's bad. That's lost basically, just heating up the material. Right? And that is what this is measuring. What is the efficiency or the probability with which this desired reaction actually happens? And this, generally speaking, comes from the design of the molecule itself. So you can put that down. So basically, again, it's just the number of emitted photons divided by the number of excited molecules, and 1%. We'll say it's 95%. So we can engineer this to be high. Doesn't have to be, but that's it. The next term is what's called the Stokes efficiency, which some of you, and it's about 75%, but some of you might be familiar with Stokes shift, which is approximately explained here. It happens because if you look at let's look here for a second at the spectrum of the fluorescent molecule, you have an excitation spectrum. In other words, what are the wavelengths that this molecule will actually absorb? So this is wavelength, and this is a relative, think about this as a relative probability. Okay? It's said fluorescence, ignore that, think about it as a probability. So if I am at 475 nanometers, which is blue light, it's a very high probability this molecule will absorb. But if I'm at 350 nanometers, which is UV, there's no probability of that, which is what I've said before. UV has no effect on the material other than degrading. The degradation is not explained here in this plot. Okay? So you want to make sure that this blue plot is as wide as possible to absorb as much energy as possible. But that's hard to do. On the other hand, the emission is always a little bit red-shifted. It means to the right. Okay, and we'll see why in a second. But always the emitted photon will have less energy than the photon that's absorbed. We'll see why in a second. But you can see the emission also has a spectrum. This is why I was saying this spectrum needs to match the spectrum of absorption of the solar cell as best as possible. If we use silicon, this is no good, right? This is in the red. This is in the green, 500, 550 nanometers. Silicon doesn't absorb it very well. So we have to be very careful on how we choose these things. Now, to understand this shift, we can look here, which is our simplified quantum picture. So you have the ground state. The molecule starts here. It absorbs the excitation photon. It's exciting. Okay, it has a lot of energy. It goes way up there. But when it goes way up there, quantum mechanics actually dictates that it needs to relax really, really fast to the band edge, which is this edge here. Okay, so it undergoes this transition from here to here, really, really fast. That's in like picoseconds, 10 to the minus 12, 10 to the minus 13 seconds. Then, if we are lucky, or we design this molecule properly, it will relax back to the ground state by emitting this light. That is the emission that we're looking for. It's shown in red. Now you can see why the emission has lower energy than the excitation, right? The excitation forces it to a much higher level. So this vertical axis is energy, and this is a smaller level. So it has lost some energy. So this loss of energy is referred to as the Stokes loss, a Stokes shift. So you have to account for that. That cannot be overcome. That comes from quantum mechanics. You can put them all together, basically, plot them. Oh, there's a couple more terms. So the next term is the eta host, which is the host efficiency. This is pretty simple. This is just saying how much light is absorbed by the host material itself, which can be glass or plexiglass or whatever, some sort of polymer material. But generally, it's very low. Some polymers are better than others. So for PMMA, which is plexiglass, about 95, 98%. Then there's the efficiency of PIR, which, generally speaking, it's meaningless, right? When we say total internal reflection, it means it's total internal reflection. There's no question about the 100% reflection. But in practice, that's not always true because you might have some roughness on the surface, not perfectly smooth. In other words, if there's a little bit of scratches here, some of the light can escape out, right? Scatter out. So that accounts for that. But it's pretty small usually. And then this self-absorption is basically the fraction of fluorescent photons reaching the edges of the sheet without being lost or reabsorption, which is what I was saying before. Some of those photons can get reabsorbed to account for that. So this depends on a lot of things, but generally it can vary from 40 to 80%. It also depends on how big the thing is. Now, if you multiply them all out, oh, I guess I did not do it. If you multiply all these efficiencies out, you'll get a number which is probably less than 10%. So the world record, at least a few years ago, was about 10 to 12%. That is by stacking 3 different, like a multi-junction solar cell. So it's pretty low. So that's why it's still kind of technology in flux, quite immature, but still a lot of work. Very interesting applications. So this is my last slide. The main takeaway I want you to take from this is I want you to know that something like this exists, and this is a type of concentration that we haven't talked about before. Okay? And that's it. And then I want to spend the rest of the class to talk about 2 things. One is the instructions for the final assignment, and finally, I'm asked to make sure you do the survey in class at the end of the class. But we will probably finish soon. So, any questions about this before I move on? No? Okay. So let's take a quick look at the. Let's see if I have. Let me bring that. I forgot to bring that up. There we go. Okay. Hopefully, all of you are already working on this. But I wanted to clarify a few things. So, in class on Thursday, you're going to make a presentation primarily focused on the business plan, and those are the different sections I'll talk about. Okay? And after that, all you need to send me is a short video pitch and the first and final versions of the canvas. That's it, nothing else. And if you do present your video in class, obviously you don't need to send it again. You can just email it to me. That's it. And I know some of you might want more time since you're asking for the last part. Okay. Is that clear? Okay, so now let's go through the parts quickly. So there are obviously very specific instruction sets. We're trying just because it's easier to follow instructions if you have them. I think so that's why I'm pretty good. First is just a summary. This is called an elevator pitch. An elevator pitch is what is supposed to happen if you run into an elevator with a venture capitalist. Right? You have enough time to go from the first floor to whatever, 3, 4, 4th floor to make it. What does that mean? That means 30 seconds. Right? You're going to be able to explain what you are doing and make it seem relevant in a very short time. It's an art. I know you're not going to get it perfect, but that's okay. Let me try. Number 2, go-to-market strategy. So this should come out of your canvas or whatever you've done for your canvas. Relatively simple. I mean, simple questions, hard to answer them. I understand it's not easy. But do your best. Right? Pull your customers, describe your engagement discussion with them today if you have. And you should have something from the canvas. Have you validated their needs? In other words, have you kind of closed the loop, heard something, some specific requirement, and address this in your innovation? Doesn't have to be options. Prove, somehow make a case that they will buy from you and you cannot do it. There's not enough time. And how will you acquire the customers? That also comes from the canvas. So that should be okay, right? Any questions? Okay, right? Yeah.
Can our elevator pitch just be our video instead of
Yes.
part of our presentation?
But the video, yeah.
A little bit more, though.
It'll be a little longer, but sure. Yeah, it can be the first 10 seconds of your video, for sure. Keep in mind that my goal here is for you to go through this exercise, right? Because you won't, if I don't force you to do it, you won't do it. and doing this is important for you to kind of think in this process. That's my goal here. Not to give you more work. Market and industry analysis. This is hard to do, I understand, not easy, but take a cut at it. Okay? We kind of briefly talked about it. I know it's not, as an engineer, this is not natural for us to think about, which is why I'm forcing you to think about something new. Okay? How large is the market? What market segments are you going after? Again, should come out of the canvas. Is the market growing? How fast? You may not be able to answer it, but I'm putting the questions out there. Examples to look at. How do you deal with competitions? Large companies, if you're going after Apple, you better have a strategy, right? For your channel partnerships. Again, all of this should come naturally out of the canvas, which is why we did that exercise. This, of course, should be the easiest part for you. This is the technical discussion. You should have very good hands on it, so I expect a very clear, beautiful explanation here. Basically, you can take it from one of your previous assignments. Describe your product, have some technology validation if you have a demo, simulations, whatever. Talk a little bit about what will it take to go from where you are to an actual product. That vision is really critical for any startup. So I want you to kind of add that thought process. And if you want to talk about IP, that's great. If you don't, it's fine. How would you protect your ideas? This I know is hard also. Number 5, economics, a very simple financial plan. Now I did not give a template because there are no simple templates. But what I mean by financial plan is simple. All you need to think about, what are your costs? What are your sales? That's it. And hopefully your sales cover your costs more and more. For, 3 years, 5 years, something like that. Make a plan. Okay? So you have to think, right? You have to kind of visualize what will, does it make sense? You can't just throw in some random stuff, obviously. Right? It needs to make sense with everything else. So that's why that exercise is kind of an exercise in thinking about the whole thing. Then you probably want to talk about how you raise funding, whether it's grants, whatever it is, what are the milestones. So kind of think a little bit on that story. That's easy. So you can talk about yourself, and that's it. So this is Canvas simple. Hopefully take a picture of your first canvas, which you already did, or all of you did. Take a picture of your last canvas. Put them next to each other and tell me what happened. Or tell us what happened. To me, this is very, very important and interesting also. So hopefully you have gained some insight. And hopefully you interviewed some potential customers. I won't hold you to it, but it would be good if you did. Yeah, go ahead.
Is that part of our presentation, or is that?
I would, yeah, I mean, I would make it part of the presentation, but you don't have to. Yeah, you can just send it to me later. Yeah. I'm flexible, it's up to you, to some extent. It's your time, I want you to make the most of it. So